Welcome to Spooky Ass Shit. I am your host, Eric Dwinnells, and tonight, you and I are going to talk about the Boogeyman. We're going to get into all things Boogeyman in just a minute, but of course, first, we've got a little housekeeping to do. Last week, Fatima Elmi was on, and we talked about some of our favorite cases from Unsolved Mysteries, seasons 1 through 3. But I did a little bit, basically what I gave you guys last time was just exactly what Unsolved Mysteries had to say about the cases. I dug a little deeper after the fact, and those cases, there's a lot they left out on Unsolved Mysteries for time and, other considerations. But some of those stories are even crazier in real life. So maybe we'll do an update episode later on of Volume 2 of our Volume 2. Before we dig into tonight's subject, I want to remind everyone you can visit us online at spookyas.com or spookyasshit.com. They both take you to the same place, and that is the show's blog page. There you can listen to each and every episode, as well as find pictures and videos and all sorts of goodies from each episode, as well as links to our social media profiles. That's at spookyasshit on both Instagram and Twitter. And if you want to like us on Facebook, you can find us at facebook.com/spookyas. Okay, I just noticed the sound was a little bit funky there for a minute. So hopefully I fixed the problem. It might be a little bit louder now. Depends. If my editing is good, you won't even have noticed a difference. But I never claimed to be a professional. So if I sound a little bit louder now, a little bit more clear, that's why. Okay, so let us talk about the Boogeyman. We begin by asking, what exactly is a Boogeyman? We've all probably heard of a Boogeyman, but what exactly is it? And that is actually a very tough question to answer in a specific sense. In a vague sense, we've got plenty of answers. But in case you have not heard of a Boogeyman, basically, it's any number of a type of spirit or ghost or demon or monster of some sort that children are afraid of because their parents warned them, if they do this, whatever this bad thing is, the Boogeyman will come for them. Or it could be a name that parents give to the fear that children have of monsters hiding in their closets or under their bed or outside their window at night. Parents might just say, oh, it's just a Boogeyman. It's not really something to be afraid of. It's just something you're seeing in your imagination. But in the olden days, and in some countries even to this day, even parts of the good old USA, it is still the case that different types of boogeymen roam the nightscape. Our dictionary definition of a boogeyman is a mythical creature in many cultures used by adults to frighten children into good behavior. Sometimes, although not usually, the boogeyman is a nickname for the devil. Simply means the devil. But that's not usually the case. The Boogeyman is usually a lot more specific than that. It's just that he varies so much from culture to culture, it's hard to say, this is the Boogeyman, this is what a Boogeyman is. So we have to wonder, where does the name Boogeyman come from? Well, here in the United States, we usually say Boogeyman. Over in the UK, they would say Bogeyman. And Boogeyman is probably the more correct way because it comes from the Middle English word bogey, meaning hobgoblin. And it's thought to come to England from an even older German term, Bogeyman, which essentially means the same thing as a boogeyman. Now there's a related word that I find interesting. The term is called Bugbear, from bug, meaning a goblin or a type of scarecrow, and bear, meaning, a bear. But this was supposed to be a demon in the form of a bear that would come through and eat children. But it could also mean something just generally like a scary thing. So basically a type of boogeyman. However, the word bugaboo is also said to come from a mistranslation of this word. So bugbear became bugaboo. Now this reminds me of Bugaboo Creek Steakhouse, which was basically a New England food chain, although there were some throughout the East Coast. If you ever went there, you might remember that it was kind of like rustic themed, like a northern wilderness kind of thing, like Canada, maybe Maine. You'd think about those kind of places, wilderness. And they had talking animals. Some of them had a talking moose or a talking buffalo. Heads. They weren't the full bodies, just heads hanging up on the wall. And now Bugaboo Creek is out of business. And I don't remember Bugaboo Creek being particularly amazing or anything, but we did have one close to where I grew up. And now it's a beer works. And I like the beer works. It's a good place. But still, sometimes I'm in there and I think, there used to be a talking moose in here. And it makes me sad that it's not there anymore. On the other hand, he never said anything that interesting. He would talk about the adventure of flavor that you're about to go on. And also the moose. The buffalo had a deep voice, but the moose, like, he talked kind of like me. And I don't know, when I see a big moose, I don't imagine him having, like, you know, you want a deeper voice in your moose. That's my theory. However, I also remember when the Natick Mall in Natick, Massachusetts first opened, before it became the Collection with a bunch of stores that nobody that lives in the area could actually afford. When it very first opened, there was a store in there, and I'm almost certain it was called Natural Wonders. And that was one of the stores. You know how you kind of have, like when you're a kid and you go to the mall, there's certain stores that you'll always visit? Well, this store, Natural Wonders, they always had like stuff that would interest me. Like they had the mosquito, you know, the fossilized mosquitoes and like dinosaur teeth and, you know, stuff like that. Of course, it wasn't real, but they had all these kind of like novelty type things. But one thing that they also had were these little figures, like wooden carved figures. You might think of them kind of like a fetish doll, if you're familiar with those. And they were labeled as Bogeymen. And they had a little story on their tag. And I couldn't find pictures of them online, and I couldn't find the little tag, and I can't find any mention of Natural Wonders, so maybe I'm misremembering the name of the store. I don't think I am, though. But in any event, this was back in the early to mid-90s, and it was before the prevalence of the internet, I guess, so maybe there weren't people taking pictures of these things. But if you've got one, please let me know. Send me in a picture. But basically, they looked like you would guess that they were carved either like somewhere in Africa or maybe like Polynesian, something like that. They looked a little bit like tiki-ish or tribal. And they were, you know, they had, I think, a couple different sizes. You could pick your size. But the little card attached said that these were bogeymen, and they came from the Bogey tribe that English explorers discovered. And when they would come home to England, they would tell their children they better behave or the bogeyman will get them. The Bogey tribemen will get them. Now, I didn't find that story anywhere, but interestingly, in Southeast Asia, it is popularly believed that the term bogeyman refers to the Boganese, which were a group of pirates from Indonesia. The pirates often attacked English and Dutch trading ships in the 18th century. And so that's where the idea that the English carried this name back to England and started scaring their children with them. However, etymologists disagree with this because words relating to bogeymen were in common use centuries before the European colonization of Southeast Asia. So, it means the name bogeyman is actually older than the discovery of these Boganese pirates. So, Natural Wonders could have been making it up, or they could have got this story confused. Who knows? In any event, that's most likely not where the term comes from. So, what does the boogeyman look like? There's no specific appearance. It's really very varied from region to region, and even sometimes within the same region, in the same village or town, you could ask two different families, and they'll give you two different versions of what the boogeyman looks like. He's not really a set thing, usually. It's more just the general idea of a terror, a monster that will come to you in the night. Now, I can't speak for everybody, but I grew up watching Mr. Boogedy. Boogedy boo. Which was a Disney special, which I'm sure we'll cover in detail someday on Spooky AS, although I don't know, because I covered one of my favorite Halloween specials, the Halloween that almost wasn't, and it's one of our lowest rated episodes, so maybe that means we shouldn't do it. But on the other hand, this is my show, and we talk about the things that I find interesting, so maybe we will talk about Mr. Boogedy and the sequel, which I didn't even know existed for many, many, many years, Bride of Boogedy. Anyway, that is one idea of what the Boogeyman looks like, and that's kind of what I had in my head as a kid. If you've never seen it, he's humanoid, but his face kind of looks like a meatball, and he wears a green cloak with a hood on, and little tip, the cloak is where he gets his magic from. It was given to him by the devil. Very campy devil, by the way. If you ever do watch that special, when they tell the story of how Mr. Boogedy got his cape, watch the devil in the background. Very campy, and he sticks his tongue out a lot. It's really weird. The idea of the Boogeyman is very common in the United States and in England. However, throughout the rest of the world, the variation... See, when I thought of the Boogeyman, it was really just a monster that would come at night to terrify you, maybe eat you, something like that. But in most of the world, it's considered like a creature that will come at night to steal you, to take away children. And it usually has to do with your behavior. I will say my mom never once told me that the Boogeyman would come get me if I was bad or anything. My brother Dan, he didn't say that exactly, but if you remember a few episodes back, if you listen to that episode, Gates to Hell, Confronting Family, you can hear me tell the story of when I went to church one time with Brother Dan, a different church than we normally went to, and he told me that if I was bad, Jesus would come down off the cross and get me. So I guess that was also a type of Boogeyman that lived in my memory as a child. Another Boogeyman, this is not exactly a Boogeyman, but it's kind of a Boogeyman story. I might have told this on the show before, I'm not certain, so forgive me if I have. But I'll try to fill it with more detail so it sounds more interesting. Anyway, I do remember that when I was young, my mother and I used to drive by this playground, and looking back, I do remember it being a little bit overgrown. It was probably kind of an abandoned playground. There were like trees growing like right in the middle of it, right next to some of the things you could ride on, and there was really not too much in there. There was a lot of weeds over everything, but one thing that caught my eye every single time was this giant caterpillar that you could climb. It had handles and stuff, like instead of like it was a centipede kind of thing, right? But instead of legs, it was these like handlebars that you could climb up and down, and it was curved. And I remember it was blue and yellow, and it had big eyes and a big old smile, and I wanted to climb that thing. So when we were driving by it one time, I said, "Mom, let's stop at that playground and play on that." Now, again, looking back, I can see it's an abandoned playground, probably not the safest, and it was kind of right on the road, and it was maybe not the best neighborhood, so there's a number of reasons why my mom wouldn't have wanted to stop, but she didn't want to turn and explain all that to a child, so she just said, no, we can't go there, and I said, why not? And she said, because that's a playground for bad children. Well, in my little brain, I was like, there's a playground specifically for bad children? What did they do? Why are they only allowed to play at that playground? They can't go to other playgrounds? Am I at a playground that's specifically for good children? What do I do to get sent to the bad children's playground? In any event, we never did go to that playground. But when I grew older and started driving, I said, you know what? I've wanted to climb that damn centipede since I was a little kid. I'm going to go to that playground and I'm going to climb that centipede. But by the time I went there, the whole playground had been torn down. No sign of that rusting old centipede. It's one of the biggest regrets of my life. But in most countries, it is described as a creature that will come and get you if you are bad. For example, in many Latin countries, they tell the story of Hombre del Saco, or Sack Man. He will come in the night and put the naughty children into a great big sack that he carries on his back and take them away. As I said, this kind of boogeyman is very popular all around the world with only slight variations, and perhaps the most famous of this type of boogeyman is Krampus, who we know from our Christmas celebrations. We'll talk all about Krampus someday. Most boogeymen worldwide are simply known for scaring children or taking the bad children away. But some bogeymen specialize in specific types of naughty children. If you're a parent, perhaps you could call one of these bogeymen to help you. Is your problem that you have a child who won't go to sleep? Call El Coco. El Coco comes to us from Spain, and he eats children who don't go to sleep. He looks like a ghost with a jack-o'-lantern for a head. What's very interesting about this is that this is one of the possible origins of the name that we gave to coconuts. Spanish explorers first discovered coconuts, and when they did, they looked at them and saw the hair on all sides of it, and then the impression left by the root at the base of the nut, you know, the 3 or 4 little indentions, and it looked like a face, and they said this looked like the face of a witch or a ghost. They had the legend of El Coco, and then that became what they called these, El Coco nuts. So we have coconuts. Brazil has a slight variation on El Coco. Theirs is called Cuca, which I know, by the way, is a dirty word in some parts of Latin America, so I apologize. However, I don't mean it that way. Cuca is said to be a female alligator who is known to creep into the rooms of children who don't go to sleep to find her dinner. What if you have a child who won't finish his dinner? Well, then you could give Italy a call and ask them to send over l'uomo nero. L'uomo nero is also known as the black man. Now, don't panic. They don't literally mean a black man. He is a tall man wearing a heavy black coat and a black hood or a heavy hat which hides his face. It's not indication of race. It's just that he hides in the shadows and he wears all black. Now, they get a little tricky over there in Italy. Sometimes the parents will knock loudly under the table, pretending that it is someone knocking at the door. And they can say something like, "Here comes the black man. He must know there's a child here who doesn't want to finish his dinner." The black man is not supposed to eat or harm the children. He just takes them away to a mysterious, frightening place. Some reports say that he will keep the children for a whole year. What if you have a child that won't take their medicine? Newanay Mama of Afghanistan is said to be a crazy person who will torment children who don't take their medicine. What if your kid is a no-good goddamn liar? You could call Caca, also known as Gaga. This bogeyman is from Malta. It is a gray, slimy creature that roams the streets at night. It can smell a child's guilt and enter their homes through cracks and fissures by extending and contracting its snail-like body through those cracks. Once inside the room, it would regrow itself to full size and flash a nasty grin, scaring children almost to death. What if your child curses too much? Then you can call Bloody Bones, a.k.a. Tommy Rawhead. He originated in England, but he's become very popular in the American South. And he's usually said to live near ponds, but he can also live in closets or under the stairs. Or, his favorite place, closets underneath stairs. He is sometimes described as having no skin on the top of his head, sometimes not any on his body, just muscles, bloody bleeding muscles. But he's always described as having blood running down his face, and he sits on top of a pile of raw bones that belonged to children who told lies or said bad words. That's a pretty badass image, I have to admit. Tommy Rawhead. It's a pretty good name, too. Sounds like a punk rock frontman or something. What if you have a lazy child? Then you better call Japan and ask them to send over one of their demons known as Namahagi. Namahagi will berate children who are lazy or who cry. So if you got a lazy crying kid, you call this demon in and it will come in and say, "What's wrong with you? Why are you so lazy? Aren't you well rested? You better get back to work. There's work to be done, and you're sitting around crying." What if your children won't stop playing outside after dark? Then you could call the small man of the Bahamas. He rides in a cart, picking up children who he finds outside after dark. If you get caught, you will never grow up. You will remain little for the rest of your life, just like the little man. And you must remain in the little man's cart forever. what about children who play too close to a body of water or a well? The Marabecca is a malevolent monster from the mythology of Sicily. She lives in wells and reservoirs and is said to come up and drag children that play too close down into the water to drown them. Hey, let's take a little time out from the show because guess what else? This is a funky-ass episode, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I messed up the volume. Now a new problem. I'm trying to read my notes off my laptop, which I'm also recording onto. And I just did the full second half of the show. But guess what? I forgot to hit the record button. I just did like a full 30 minutes talking to myself without recording it. Isn't podcasting fun? Okay, let's see. Where was I? Let's do this all over again. Maybe this will be even better because I've had practice. Let's look at it that way. This is going to be a great second half of the show because I've read through these notes and I learned how to say them and I won't be mush mouth at all. Let's try that. What if your problem is that you have a wandering child? In Inuit mythology, there is the Qualipellic, a human-like creature that lives in the sea. It has long hair, green skin, and long fingernails. They wear special clothes with large pouches so they can take babies and children who wander away from their parents. They take these children to their homes underwater, teach them how to breathe underwater, and keep them forever. What if you have an overly friendly kid who is known to talk to strangers? In the Congo, they talk about Dongola Miso, or the creature with scary eyes. This creature is normally said to look like a regular human at first, but once the child starts talking to him, and the creature has gained some level of trust from the child, it looks at them with his scary eyes. These eyes may be hypnotic, and he lures the children off and takes them to a land unknown. What happens after that? Well, nobody knows for sure. Now here's a problem that apparently was a very big deal back in jolly old England. What if you have a child that steals fruit from orchards? In the UK, a child who steals fruit from orchards faces the wrath of a giant caterpillar known as Boogedy. This is a giant caterpillar that will eat you if it catches you stealing fruit from the orchards. Or, if your child has a particular sweet tooth for gooseberry, they best be aware of the terrifyingly named creature, the gooseberry wife. That has got to be the lamest name for a monster I have ever heard. I believe the gooseberry wife is also supposed to be some kind of giant caterpillar. Only this one specifically guards gooseberries on the Isle of Wight. Hey, UK, how about we step up your giant monster game? Japan's got you totally beat. Now here's a very common problem. What if your child will not stop running off into the jungle to play? The Tata Duende of Belize is said to be a little person with wrinkly skin, a long white beard, and backwards feet. He will steal children that wander into the jungle. Now we may ask ourselves, but why are children afraid of the dark, afraid of monsters in their closet, afraid of creatures under their bed in the first place? Which came first, the fear of these creatures, or stories of the boogeymen, which then inspired the fear? Well, it seems that most studies and historical accounts would record that children are naturally afraid of the dark, of the closet, and possibly of things under their bed. They don't need to have heard stories of boogeymen first. It seems to be a natural part of aging that children will become afraid. At first, they're too young to really be afraid. Most children will grow up without a sense of fear of those kind of things, believing that they are essentially well protected. But as the child grows even just a little bit older, we're talking like 3, 4, 5 years old, They can begin to see that the world can be dangerous. They can be hurt by things. They'll see other people being a little bit nasty to each other. They'll start to notice these things that they didn't really notice before. And these can lead to the fears of unknown things, things in the dark. So, how can you help a child who is afraid of monsters in their bedroom? Well, I read a very interesting article on this. It's called Magical Thinking, Fears of the Dark and What Lurks Under the Bed. It was written by a woman named Dr. Carrie Letty Malawista. Unfortunately, I forgot to write down the exact URL of where I found it, but I will post that on the website. Or you can just Google Magical Thinking, Fears of the Dark, Malawista, something like that, and you'll find it. Now, I'm not going to read the whole article, but basically what happens is she's a therapist, and she gets a call from a couple, and they say, "You have to help us, doctor. Our child, who has never had any trouble sleeping alone in their bedroom before, all of a sudden is terrified every single night and claims that there are monsters in the closet under the bed trying to get him. And he just can't sleep through the night. We can't sleep through the night. He just wakes up screaming." So the doctor says, "Okay, how about you come into my office and we discuss your son's problem?" And they say, "You don't want us to bring our son? You don't want us to bring Max?" That was his name, Max. And Dr. Malawista said, "No, just come in yourselves and we'll figure out what the problem is." So they talk to Max, and it turns out that they report to Dr. Malawista that Max is specifically afraid of a monster in his closet. So Dr. Malawista makes a suggestion. She says to the couple that she wants them to go home, get an empty spray bottle and fill it with water. And on the bottle, they are to write monster spray. Then the parents and Max himself should go to the closet that he's afraid of and spray it all over with this monster spray. And now I'll read directly from the article. Quote, "Why should the parents engage Max in spraying his closet when they know perfectly well that the only monsters were in his imagination? The answer has to do with how children Max's age think. Monster spray works for the very same reason that Max is afraid of monsters to begin with. Children of Max's age see the world through a lens of their wishes and fears. This is also known as magical thinking. Children at this age do not differentiate between thoughts and fantasies. They inhabit a world of wonder and imagination, ruled by magic. Preschoolers like Max are convinced that their thoughts are powerful enough to create what happens in their world. Just as there are terrifying monsters under Max's bed, there is a magical spray powerful enough to rid the closet of these terrifying creatures. By suggesting that they provide Max with this magical spray and joining him in using it, I was inviting them to enter Max's world of make-believe, helping Max conquer the monsters from within." End quote. The parents go home and spray the closet just as the doctor told them, and they are happy to report that Max is sleeping better through the night. Then Max reports that there are 2 toys in his room which cause him to be afraid at night. One is a T-Rex and one is a rocket. Now, both of these toys had been in his room essentially since he was born, so the parents didn't quite understand the fear, but that's not what's important. For whatever reason, they had become a symbol to Max of things to be afraid of. On his own, Max decided that he would take these items out of his room every night before he went to bed, and then, when he woke up in the morning, first thing, he would go to the guest room where he had put the toys and bring them back into his room. Between that and the monster spray, Max started sleeping soundly at night, and eventually, he no longer required the monster spray or the toys to be removed from his room. It was a complete success. You might be thinking, well, yeah, that's great, Eric, but I don't really want to help my child who's afraid. I actually want them to be more afraid so that they stay in line. So I'm going to join the tradition of parents throughout history from around the world and tell my children about the Boogeyman who will come to get them. I especially like the idea of knocking on the table and saying, "Oh, the Boogeyman's here. You must know you're trying not to finish your dinner, or you're not going to bed." Well, guess what, parents? You're not exactly out of the woods yourself, because there are Boogeymen for bad parenting as well. In Indonesia, Wiwi Gombel is a ghost that kidnaps children mistreated by their parents. She takes these children to her nest, which is on top of a palm tree, but she does not harm them. She takes care of them as if she was the child's own grandmother. She does this until the parents become aware of what has happened to their child and what behavior they did that caused the spirit to come and take the children away in the first place. If the parent promises to change their ways and is truly sorry for what they have done to their child, Wee Gomble will return the child unharmed. If not, Wee will keep the child and raise it as her own. So there you have it, a world tour of boogeymen and their various uses. There's two roads you can take, parents. You can tell your children about the boogeymen. You can try to frighten them into being good. Or you can try more modern parenting methods, maybe a more lighthearted approach, and see how that works out for you. And of course, just hope that Wee Gomble doesn't come and take your children away from you. I want to take this time to remind everyone to please share the show with those you know who might be into spooky ass shit. We want to keep growing this audience. We want more and more spookaroos. So please share the show however you see fit. Don't forget to check out the website, spookyas.com. If you have questions, comments, show ideas, you can email me at spookyasshit@gmail.com. And of course, please remember to subscribe, rate, and review this show on iTunes or however you listen to it, whether it be Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, however you're hearing the show, go ahead, subscribe, rate, review. It makes a big difference, and it truly brightens my day every time I see nice comments from the spookaroos out there. That'll take care of this episode. Just me again this week, but you know how it is. Life gets in the way. It moves fast. Schedules change and rearrange. And sometimes it's just easier to just do the show myself. But I'll tell you this, it's not as fun. I like having people with me here more than I do doing the show by myself. So that is always my plan, to have someone here. But sometimes you just get me, and I'm not going to apologize for it anymore. So next time, hopefully, I'll have a friend back in here who will discuss these deep mysteries with us. And until next time, don't be afraid.
Children, have you ever met the Boogeyman before? No, of course you haven't, for you're much too good, I'm sure. Don't you be afraid of him if he should visit you. He's a great big coward, so I'll tell you what to do. Hush, 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 here comes the Boogeyman. Don't let him come too close to you, he'll catch you if he can. Just pretend that you're a crocodile, and you will find that Boogeyman will run away a mile. Say shoo shoo and stick him with a pin. Boogeyman will very nearly jump out of his skin. Say buzz buzz, just like the wasp that stings. Boogeyman will think you are an elephant with wings. Hush, 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 here comes the Boogeyman. Tell him you've got soldiers in your bed, for he will never guess that they are only made of lead. Say hush, hush, he'll think that you're asleep. If you make a lovely snore, away he'll softly creep. Sing this tune, you children one and all. Boogeyman will run away, he'll think it's Henry Hall. When the shadows of the evening creep across the sky, and your mommy comes upstairs to sing a lullaby, tell her that the Boogeyman no longer frightens you. Uncle Henry's very kindly told you what to do. Hush, 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 Here comes the Boogeyman. Don't let him come too close to you. He'll catch you if he can. Just pretend your teddy bear's a dog. Then shout out, fetch him, Teddy, and he'll hop off like a frog. Say meow, pretend that you're a cat. He'll think you may scratch and that will make him fall down flat. Just pretend he isn't really there. You will find that Boogeyman will finish in thin air. Here's one way to catch him without fail. Just keep a little salt with you and put it on his tail.